Just over a month from now, Utah and UCLA will begin their football season. It's a pivotal week one matchup with massive implications for the entire college football world. What are both of these teams looking like entering fall camp, and who has the edge in week one's matchup? We're going to talk about it on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On UCLA crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On UCLA your first listen and view of the day. Huge shout out to our everydayers, and we once again thank you for tuning in to our shows. If this is your first time listening, make sure you follow on social media platforms as well as you can like and subscribe on YouTube. My name is JT Wistersill, host of Locked On Utes. Excited to be joined for the first time in a couple of years by my former Pac-12 member, but now current Big Ten member, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, the host of Locked On UCLA, to talk about the biggest game of week one, Zach, that honestly you could argue no one is talking about.
Yeah, this is a huge game that I think has a lot of massive implications. You know, obviously people are going to point to the bigger names, the bigger brands, if you will, but these are two unknown teams heading into 2025, and a win for either squad could put them on an early 3-0, 4-0 start if things go right. And then all of a sudden you get put in that overhype train. And I know nobody wants to be in the overhype train, but it's always fun to be in it. And winning week one when at an 8 p.m. Pacific time kick might not be a lot of eyeballs, but could be one of those big games that changes the outlook of people's season in week one.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the timing of the game in a moment, but there is no question it is one of, in my opinion, easily one of those five most intriguing matchups from week one. I would have it higher than some of the other ones that I might earn a little bit more national profile, looking at UCLA, Alabama, Florida State. But we can talk about the timing of it in a little bit. Let's first just talk about the position that these two teams are in as we gear up for fall camp. I want to start with UCLA. Zach, you know, it's the Bruins team, finished 12th in the Big Ten last year, 5-7, 3-6 in conference play. I know you won 4 of your final 6 games too. New offensive coordinator. Obviously, Nico's in there too. Year 2 for Coach Foster. Where is this UCLA football program at right now?
I think UCLA is trending upwards. Now, the big thing is that a leap forward or a small step, right? Because Deshaun Foster's first step into national spotlight was last year's Big Ten Media Days, where he fumbled over his words. The Bulls stumbled out of the gate. It was a rough non-conference stretch, a rough travel stretch to begin the Big Ten slate. And then they started to figure things out, maybe a little bit easier scheduling. The team stayed together. And then this year, you could see UCLA went after it in the portal, went after it in next year's recruiting class, and Deshaun Foster had a much better presser. You don't always want to win the presser, but Deshaun Foster won the presser this year in the Big Ten Media Days, and the hope is they take the leap forward and you can grow while on the job. What about learning on the job, JT? Can't people do that anymore? That's what Deshaun Foster is trying to do.
Yeah, and for Utah, it's a team that's looking to bounce back. I mean, pretty much everyone, at least most, had them as the favorite to win the Big 12 a season ago after the Pac-12 crumbled. Utah coming over with so many returners. Good old Cam Rising, who you guys saw. That was one of the times Cam Rising was healthy back in that 22 season. Good times. But you guys beat him that game, actually. And, you know, post Cam Rising now for Utah, because last year he got hurt again. They fell short of expectations, missed a bowl game, one of their worst records they've had in several years. And there's a lot of reasons to think this Utah team can bounce back. Really strong offensive line, dynamic quarterback and running back you're bringing in, and the culture that is the Utah defense has a lot of people excited about this season. FanDuel as Utah is the favorite to win the Big 12. You look at like our Locked On College Football Big 12 experts, they're a little lower, having finishing 8, but the Big 12 is very wide open. Obviously for UCLA, it's an uphill climb to win the Big 12. I know a couple of major outlets, including our Spencer McLaughlin, I saw he has them picked 14th right now in the Big 10. Do you feel like that is a fair spot for them? Or do you feel like this is a team that can surprise some people this coming season in the Big 10?
I would think with arguably a worse roster last year, UCLA finished higher than the 14th best. And I think I saw even other outlets had UCLA even lower. So when I was about to get on Spencer's case, even more doubters are doubting Deshaun Foster and what UCLA has. New on offense, new offensive coordinator, Tino Sunseri coming from Indiana. A lot of pieces lost from the defense the last couple of years. I remember in 23 when Utah and UCLA played, that was a defensive slugfest when the Bruins were out in Salt Lake City. That was not one to showcase in terms of this is what offense looks like. It was a good defensive showdown between the Utes and the Bruins that day, and what I believe was a toasty day in Salt Lake City, a midday kick. It was a warm one, and it won't necessarily be the case, I think, on this Saturday night showdown this year. What UCLA has, I think, a lot of potential. And at some point, you got to turn potential into wins. I think in year 2, you can start with potential under Deshaun Foster. Obviously, they won the offseason talk with Nico coming in. We'll get to that, JT. But the big thing is UCLA has improved on a coaching staff, recruiting emphasis, and I think on the roster, they're better than they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you take that away from what Utah's bringing in, trying to bounce back from a season where they had high expectations? 2 5-7 teams that with this week 1 win can catapult into something even bigger at 25.
Yeah, a chance to make a statement for the nightcap as well, with the world of college football still watching. It is the best game. Less and less as people go to bed. We already mentioned 11.
But it is the long weekend. It is the long weekend, so they should stay up.
That's true. Long weekend. We get some Sunday games. The Monday night game, Belichick versus TCU, his first ever game. So there's a lot of intrigue there. So hopefully we will see good numbers for that game that is being broadcast on Fox. But look, first, Zach, I just want to ask you about, here's my view of this UCLA team. And I want to tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong. So I look at the strengths. I like Nico. I don't know if I love if he has to carry everything, but because of Javian Thomas, the running back transfer you got from Cal, and I know you have another back that's solid too, I feel like that's good. I think the offensive line could be good. I like that you have 2 returning starters there. I am a little nervous for like UCLA when I see and look, or not from a Utah perspective, but if I was a Bruin fan, only 4 returning starters I did see according to one site. So that was something I am very intrigued by too. So I think the offensive line could be good, like the running game. Wide receiver core, really unknown. You actually do have former Utah receiver Mikey Matthews, but looking at your group overall, no one with a season over 400 yards. I know your tight end has done some things, but he missed last year with an ACL injury too. And the defense, there's a lot of new. 1 returning starter I saw there. Maybe there's some other contributors back, but that's the biggest question for me. And honestly, I'll even just jump to here. Why I like Utah in this early game right now is because of how much newness there is for the Bruins, including new QB, new offensive coordinator that didn't even get spring to work together, that all have to come together week 1. So what do you think of all that?
Yeah, all the new parts moving together. How long does it take to gel? That's a benefit and also maybe a blessing in disguise for UCLA. They can get overlooked, or it can look very ugly week 1. And maybe that's one of those things where Utah's either going to be very lucky or they're going to be sad that they got UCLA week 1 and didn't know what hit them, right? Like when Indiana was coming at everybody early last year before people realized they were good. UCLA, they're trying to figure it out. Defensively, yes, there's no doubt about it. They lost a lot of talent from the Latu year in 23. You had Kane Medrano, who had a breakout game against Utah 2 years ago in that 23 game. Then Carson Schlesinger. Those are 3 names. They're in the NFL now. UCLA can't just simply replace that talent right away. It might take a year or 2 before they can build a recruiting base once again in LA. But I think defensively, they'll take a slight step back. I do believe that what they brought in the portal can help. Offensively, it's all going to come down to the offensive line. If they can hang in the trenches from what was a very atrocious running game that didn't involve Ethan Garbers, last year's UCLA starter, scrambling, and one of the worst sack rates in the country, then if UCLA can protect Nico, they'll have some time. And if they give their quarterback time to throw, then Nico doesn't necessarily have to carry him. And I do like what you mentioned, JT. Tight ends, somewhat of a strength the last few years with Chip Kelly transitioning to Deshaun Foster. This year, Hudson Habermill, solid coming off the injury. Mm-hmm. It's just he's not that explosive player I think that UCLA would expect. But for you, JT, how nice is it not to have to talk about Will Cam Rising play week in and week out for what seems like the 3rd straight year, now that there's actually an answer?
Oh my gosh, it's been such a weight off this team. You can feel by the end of last season, everyone was wore down. Kyle Whittingham said that it was the most frustrating year of his career. And you can feel it back-to-back seasons, including, as we kind of talked about too, like the last time the UCLA game was really crazy. If we're diving deep into the week, because Cam Rising, that was the only game he dressed and warmed up. So we're all like, oh my gosh, he
might play.
And then he goes and gets undressed. But we've been dealing with that for 2 years. Will he play? And now you have a guy in Devon Dampier coming in, the New Mexico transfer, who he's been very durable. And man, is he athletic too. He was actually one of the only quarterbacks in the country last year, or the only quarterback, to rush for 1,000 yards and throw for 2,500. He led the country in yards per carry. According to Pro Football Focus, too, he actually was tied for the country lead, too, in forced missed tackles. So incredibly athletic and dynamic quarterback. Over 30 touchdowns in total. Got to turn down some of those turnovers, but I do feel like a lot of those were on his receivers as well last year, too. But obviously making that jump to P4, there's going to be some questions there, too. But it is such a weight for this team, not having to worry about, hey, what's Cam Rising? What's the backup job? Like, we know it's Devon Dampier. Utah's new offensive coordinator worked with Devon Dampier last year. Though two of them together at New Mexico led the fourth best offense in a yards per game category in the country a season ago. So it's nice you have that going there. And with a few other key continuity pieces being all five starters back on the offensive line, there's some really good things that Utah has going for them. And they've had a nice offseason. But arguably, there was no bigger offseason addition than the one the Bruins were able to make when they landed Nico. What does the Nico piece mean week one for this game, Utah UCLA? We're going to continue to talk about it in a moment on this Locked On Utes, Locked On UCLA crossover. Today's crossover episode is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. With 5 Hour Energy, have you just ever been there where it's in a really long day and it's just time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy? And that's what 5 Hour Energy can do with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized, whether at work, golfing, or whatever it may be, even getting through a wild college football Saturday, because those are just around the corner. That's where 5 Hour Energy has you covered. With 5 Hour Energy, you can head over today. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code Locked On Golf is the promo code. All caps, Locked On Golf, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get energized, boost your need to power through. Order transition-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors on the course. Grape Ginger Live Favor gives you the best parts of your game clubhouse to go without chasing down the Bev cart. So head over and pick up 5 Hour Energy today. Nico is a UCLA Bruin. It's by far the biggest storyline that this matchup has to offer. I think it's one of the biggest storylines of the week one of the college football season. Zach, what has it been like since landing Nico? And also say this, as I kind of mentioned, he didn't get to go through spring ball. So this is a new offense, a new offensive coordinator, new pieces, new teammates that he's got to gel with and build chemistry quickly for this week one matchup. Do you think the Bruins can get on the same page and hit the ground running offensively? Because as you mentioned, it was an offense that was not able to do so a year ago.
Yeah, but that was under a very complex West Coast offense system under Eric Bieniemy, and that just threw everybody off, right? You go from Chip Kelly to Eric Bieniemy, and UCLA said, all right, this isn't working out. They go to Tino. And from what was, a dynamo in Indiana's offense last year, this could be one of those guys that could be a 1 to 2 year guy for UCLA if he does well. And Tino Sansera, the offensive coordinator, supposed to be a QB whisperer, a great hire. I'm not sure how long he'll stay at UCLA, and that's probably a good thing. But that means they got to take advantage when he has the pairing like Nico Iamaleava. And with Nico, the one thing I'll say about the lack of time, Tennessee is on a semester system. UCLA is on a quarter system. So UCLA had a later spring practice schedule. That's why Tennessee had that spring game earlier than UCLA's, much earlier. And then, so he was out of school a bit earlier. So if he had to learn, if you will, or have some extra time, he had that extra month or so to start. And then UCLA, as a school, being on the quarter system, because remember, they still technically are student athletes, classes doesn't start until late September. And the academics are a grind at UCLA, and compared to most schools, and not that that says anything about Utah, it just is, but UCLA doesn't start until late September. So this is football, all right? Think NFL-like mentality for these guys until late September. So when UCLA gets into Big Ten schedule in like their fourth week of the season, then UCLA, that's when it might start to come unglued when it comes to academics adding in. But the big thing is, for the Bruins, Nico coming in, a lot of transfers came in as well. So there's a lot of guys learning. So it's a lot of people on the same page. So if Tino has an idea that, hey, there's a lot of guys learning the offense, you can't just overcomplicate it in April or early May. So as much as he could be behind the 8 ball, I'm not sure how far behind he is, with still plenty of time to practice without academics as a problem since mid-May. And he won't have to take a class until September. That's like the longest summer break ever. You know, I think Phineas and Ferb, you know, he could have a sing along, and he could talk about these are all the plays. And he could do that to the Phineas and Ferb theme song about the plays in the UCLA playbook. And I think he will eventually have a good year. But I guess the big question that we're talking about is, will that happen week 1? That's a big question mark, but I'd be excited to see how it goes.
I'm just excited we got a Phineas and Ferb reference in. This has just became my favorite crossover ever, simply for that. So thank you for that, Zach. And it is an interesting thing that we have 2 quarterbacks who weren't on the same teams last year. As I mentioned, when it comes to week 1 being on just the same page, in sync with everything that one team's trying to do, I would give the edge to Devon Dampier because he's been in this offense. He's the same offensive coordinator. Both teams dealing with some of those new pieces, but also, like, you know, if you're Utah, you have all 5 offensive linemen back. 2 tackles for Utah, look up pretty much any 2026 NFL mock draft. You're going to see both those guys in the first round. PFF has Spencer Fano as their best offensive lineman in college football this coming season. Utah's right tackle too. So really like where this Utah offense should be at week 1, but there are still going to be questions. Hey, what does Kyle Whittingham let this team do, let this offense do that will hang over them? One thing that is intriguing, though, and I know some UCLA fans are going to be surprised to hear this, but there is a chance that by the end of the season, and maybe even in week 1 game, the best quarterback in this matchup actually was in Salt Lake City. There is a chance that Devon Dampier will outplay Nico in this game as well as on the season. If you look at last year, Nico only threw for over 200 yards in 3 of his 10 games against P4 competition. Keep that in mind because obviously did that against others, but against P4. Versus Devon Dampier, he only had 2 games against P4 teams. He did it in just those 2. He did throw for more yards last year. Yes, we are talking about G5 defenses versus P4, but I already talked a lot about what makes Devon Dampier transcendent. That ability to get yards outside of just, hey, like you can use him in the quarterback running game. He is a true dual threat dynamic quarterback. 19 rushing touchdowns last season too. So he is a tremendous player. And I do think is going to be a thorn in the Bruins side. He was only sacked 5 times last year, Zach. And that was just like, I could have said, hey, he got sacked 5 times against one of those P4 teams going behind a G5 offensive line. But he really, to me, is a guy who's ready to make this transition from G5 to P4. So I think Devon Dampier has a chance to be special week 1. How do you think he's going to fare against this UCLA defense?
Well, UCLA, if you talk about the trenches, that's where they struggled last year, both offensively and defensively. You talk about Dampier not getting taken down. Last year, UCLA couldn't protect their quarterback. They allowed 34 sacks. And then last year was also a transition away from a dominant defensive line UCLA had in 23. So 24 and now 25 have been transitionary years. They did have a couple of guys injured last year. They're getting them back. So I wonder how ready and how successful they'll be, like a Keanu Williams that can help out up front. But they lose a Jay Tuia. They lose like a Femi Oladejo who has moved to the edge, and a lot of linebacker talents. So if you're talking about a rushing quarterback, a dual threat opportunity, maybe this is one of those things where we're going to see a shootout in a big, high-scoring game, that late night Pac-12 after dark that we all want between the Big Ten and the Big 12. And that's kind of the more I'm listening, the more I'm thinking about it. I think that's where this game is going to end up being. If UCLA is to be successful, I think that's not a bad place to be, but I think that might be where it might end up. I think Dampier will be successful, but UCLA has had a lot of changes in the secondary. So while he might rack up yards, if UCLA is to be successful, it'd be on turnovers, as is the case in any week 1, week 12 game. But I wouldn't be shocked if Dampier has a big game unless UCLA shocks everybody and brings out a crazy solid defense week 1.
Which is possible, too, because you look at this UCLA team. We talked about they were playing some of their best football down the stretch end of the regular season last year. And, yes, a lot of new pieces, but in the transfer portal era, we've seen things go many ways. Sometimes you get in Indiana last year where you bring in, I mentioned only 4 returning starters for the Bruins. Sometimes you get almost no returning starters, Indiana last year, and boom, your success. Or you get Florida State last year and you fall on your face. So that's where it'll be interesting. And I'm not saying it's going to be one or the other for UCLA. They could very well fall in the middle of that. But it's very interesting to see when you go all in on the portal. And, you know, it's the same thing for Devon Dampier in Utah. I think Devon Dampier is going to be really good for Utah. But we can even just look last year. Baylor brought in a G5 quarterback, and it did not go well. Right away, they went back to Robertson, who was their better guy. But you also could look at Indiana. Curtis Rourke from Ohio, he goes to Indiana. He has a success too. So it's very difficult now to kind of predict and talk about these week 1 college football matchups, because all of a sudden by the time they get around, we're talking about, oh yeah, we had no idea that this guy was going to be a baller, or this transfer edition wouldn't work out too, Zach. There are so many unknowns because of the transfer portal element, the continuity and coming together, that these teams are really going to have to do their best to hit the ground running and hit sync in fall camp, even though they've had some spring ball, because the bright lights are going to be on in week 1 at 11 p.m. Eastern time. And these teams have got to get clicking fast if they want to get a win in a tough non-conference game.
Yeah, and here's a question for you. I have JT. Last year, Utah 5-7 started off 4-0, then a lot of one-score failures at the end, right? When things weren't clicking. Do you think Dampier will help? Obviously, it's not the same like in the NFL where it's like analytically driven about one-score games. It's a little different in college football, I would say. But do you think having a guy like Dampier will help solve potentially those one-score games that you're just going to see a lot in the Big 12 as you had ASU go from a quote-unquote worst to first? At least that's preseason predictions, and we saw that was not clear, even though it was like a 4-team tie for first place or close to it. Do you think having a new guy like that will help solve those one-score issues in the games that Utah had last year?
I do, because the biggest issue for Utah in those one-score games was quarterback play. Now, Isaac Wilson was the guy who came in there, brother of Zach Wilson, and he just wasn't ready. He was a true freshman. They thrust him out there, and it didn't go well. It was a mess, and he was not ready. Utah changed offensive coordinators to midway through the year because it was such a mess. You mentioned Utah starting 4-0. Well, who were Utah's opponents those first few weeks of the season? They weren't very good. Their one Big 12 win, well, I should say, they also beat Baylor at the time, but that was also before Baylor their offense took off towards the second half of the season. The one true Big 12 win they got, excluding the non-conference one against Baylor, was Oklahoma State.
The two favorites.
Yeah, exactly. The two favorites. Yeah, the two favorites in the conference. And they were dead last. They didn't win a Big 12 game. So Utah's success that season was really early on. It was more so due to who they played. And they were in those games with those other teams, but it was so much so just the quarterback play kept them out of it. Utah was not super far off from me, but the reason that they were able to put up numbers and points early on in the season was because of who they're playing. Because then when they played those good teams, their defense kept them in it. This is a Utah defense. They were second in the Big 12 last year. They did finish in the top 20 defensive ranking-wise last season too. And they've lost some, but they've got enough back where I'm anticipating a slight step back for that Utah defense, but I'm still anticipating top 5, maybe they're the third best in the Big 12, just with what they lost. I think it'll be tough to be right back where they were. But I do feel like Utah, look, Devon Dampier, whenever I turn on the tape, I just become more and more impressed. To me, he was one of the, like, when you were to go, okay, why did the play fail if it did at New Mexico? He was more times than not one of the reasons that it did. He was towards the bottom of the blame totem pole when that did happen. He turns it over a little bit, but he's got it. I really think he can be a special and transcendent player. We've seen a couple of college football rankings put him inside the top 10 of their quarterbacks too, put him inside the top 3 of the Big 12 even. So he's got a chance to break out and be special. And Zach, one thing that I'm frustrated by for both Dampier and Nico is if they want to make a week 1 statement, it comes at 11 p.m. Yes, I'm happy this game is by itself in a standalone window where everyone can be excited about it. But I really wish that Fox, who had Ohio State, Texas at noon as their big noon kickoff, I wish rather than following it with Iowa State, South Dakota, I think it is, like it's going to be a terrible game, would decided to move that game, the Utah UCLA game, to 3:30. And I'm fine going against Alabama, Florida State, because as I said, I just don't think that'd be that good of a game. And I still think it's the second best game on at that window. You'll get more than you would at 11 p.m. How do you feel about the 11 p.m. Eastern time kick?
I think it's a good thing for the players, the coaches, and the fans, because the fans in the stadium, not the fans who are watching the game, because the Rose Bowl in August is miserable. In early September, miserable. Anytime there's the sunshine, it's a great tailgating venue, obviously, but as much as we play up the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, picture perfect weather in Southern California. In August, it can be well over 100 degrees. I can tell you that from being in one of the hottest games I've ever been to when UCLA played Bowling Green in 2022. That was like 110 degrees. That game kicked off at like 11. And I know 11 a.m., not p.m., 11 a.m. So an early kickoff would mean a lot more television eyeballs. But from an in-person, in-stadium perspective, it's good. The players would enjoy it. You don't want a lot of cramping to affect that early game, and that'll be much cooler. That's what can lend to a higher scoring, crazy game that might end well after or close to midnight. But for the national spotlight, this is not going to be fun. Like, we'll be forgotten about. They already don't like the West Coast / mountain teams sometimes. And then it'll be late. As much as it'll be like a Labor Day weekend, they'll just find a way to forget about it. The thing that drives this game, no offense to anybody else on the field, Nico is going to bring so much interest in this game, which is why I thought them being at 8 was just a shocker. 8 p.m. Pacific. I was like, why did they spend all year, all offseason talking about Nico and they just shove him into the 8 p.m. Pacific time zone like that's a prime time slot. It is not. And in the West Coast, we're not used to 8 p.m. That's not what we do on the West Coast 8 p.m. start time, unless you're in Arizona in an early season game and you need to start because it's so hot. I think it'll be good for the players. There shouldn't be as much cramping, and that should lead to a better ball game. Just less eyeballs will be watching it live.
I could argue that that Nico's decision to go from Tennessee to UCLA was the biggest story of the college football offseason. And the decision to throw that at 11 p.m. Eastern time, where there are going to be so many Tennessee fans that, yes, they will still stay up because they are going to very much still be rooting for Nico's downfall. Like that,
they're going to hate watch. They're hate watching. You got a lot of orange Utah fans.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's absolutely what's going to happen. So to me, that's where I'm disappointed that they decided to, yes, do I want that for Nico, all those people rooting against him? No, I don't want that for the player. But at the same time, I want more eyeballs on the game so these teams get the national exposure and respect they deserve, whoever ends up on top. And speaking of ending up on top, right now, FanDuel is Utah favored by 6.5 in this game. I honestly was a little surprised it was that high. Yes, I feel like as we sit here right now, Utah is going to be able to come out of that game with a gritty week 1 win. But it is on the road still versus a UCLA, a Big Ten team that has some talented pieces. Granted, got to fit them, and they have to come together very quickly. But I'm surprised to see Utah the favorite by that much this early. Maybe as we got closer, if we saw the line move. So yeah, I right now, if you ask me to pick, I would say Utah deserves to be the favorite, and I'd give them the edge. I'm a little surprised by the 6.5, though. Would I take it if push came to shove? I guess I'd take Utah and the points to cover. But Zach, how do you feel about this spread? And if you had to predict it right now, who wins this game?
I would think I'd want to take UCLA with the points at home. I do think everything we've talked about, it should lean Utah if you're going straight pick them for the matchup. I feel like you would go with Utah. I think that's a fair thing. I think it's also fair, looking from a UCLA side of things and as a UCLA fan saying they can win this game week 1. Crazy things have happened and things have turned around. It's a home game. I wonder what the energy will be because school doesn't start for UCLA till late September. That means no students are in town, but there'll be a lot of interest in Nico. And I wonder what the Rose Bowl will look like from a UCLA fan base side. It won't be too hot, so nobody can complain, 8 p.m., it's too hot it won't be. It's perfect prime time, perfect SoCal weather at that point. I think UCLA could absolutely win this game. I'm dumb enough and naive enough and, I might say UCLA will win this game, but this is kind of how it was a couple years ago when these two programs met. Very different circumstances.
Sure.
Both teams, both programs have a chance to win. And the one edge UCLA has going for them is they have the home game. Now, it would have been fun to be at 110 degrees in the middle of the day and see how both teams go at it. But UCLA has the home game, not the same like playing at Rice Eccles. No way can you compare the two. But that's what they have. And they have no tape on UCLA playing together as a unit. That's the benefit. That is the huge benefit for UCLA. Could be a bad thing week 1. That's what I could. But UCLA with the points, but the wiser decision would be Utah to win the game.
Yeah, it feels that way right now, but I am not in any way trying to disrespect UCLA. I think this is a team. I like what Coach Foster has going on there. I think they are moving in the right direction. I loved the offensive coordinator hire. And I'll say this. I think Devon Dampier has a chance to be better than Nico this year. I think Nico's going to have a good year. We see all the time quarterbacks, or just players in general in college football, make a freshman year to sophomore year leap. That's why most of these guys redshirt. Instead, Nico was thrust out there and still played pretty well, all things considered, in the SEC. Bowl game against Ohio State wasn't great, but overall, Nico did a lot of good things. And I do think he could come out there and put some of those people that are hate watching, as we mentioned, on notice with a strong performance too, and help this Bruins team get a big week 1 win against a team that I think has a chance to contend in the Big 12 and thus a chance to make the college football playoff in the Utah Utes. But I cannot wait till we get to this matchup. We still got fall camp to figure out so many things about who's going to be starting where, what positions are people going to be lining up at, injuries, all those things that inevitably occur over the course of a fall camp season. There's a lot to be determined about this matchup, but I can't wait till we get to week 1. Zach, this is a lot of fun. Really appreciate you joining me.
Can't wait, JT, of course. I think this one will be the opposite of 23. It won't be a defensive slugfest. I think we'll see a lot of points.
Okay, so would you go like over, if we went over under like 60.5, would you take the over for total points combined?
I mean, if UCLA is to win, I think you'd have to take the over. If Utah's going to win, it'll be clearly under, I would think. I mean, Utah could easily win a higher scoring game. I would think they would probably go slightly under. I think I'm in the right mindset as they will be very close to that. I think it might be like closer to a 58 of some sort. If I think they'll just miss that mark, but I think I would go under with a high scoring game.
Yeah, I only see, as we sit here right now, I only see one team clearing 25 points. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it'll be a high-scoring game, but with these offenses trying to come together, also could be which of these defenses makes the pick six or the big play on the quarterbacks, still trying to get acclimated to their new offenses overall. So it could be a high-scoring one. Maybe it turns into a defensive battle because of those new pieces. Lots of ways it can play out, and lots of ways we still got to keep covering your favorite teams every day. So thank you so much for listening. This Locked On Utes, Locked On UCLA crossover. Zach, can't wait to do it with you again in a little under a month now.
Let's do it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. All righty. Thank you again for making us your first listen and view of the day. We'll be back with you the rest of this week talking all things Utes and Bruins as we get you geared up for the Locked On college football season right around the corner.